Hello, my friends. Welcome once again to Spiritism, a closer look on this Christmas Day, 2024. You are on Kardec Radio. Luiz Lima here, broadcasting from Orlando, Florida. And it's a Christmas Day, so you know what the subject is. We're going to talk about Jesus, but we are going to continue what we started last week. Last week, we had a program about the authority of Jesus. And this is going to be the authority of Jesus, part two, because it's just so many things and so much that we have to cover when referring to, his authority. So the information that we are going to discuss today can be found in Allan Kardec's The Genesis in chapters 15 and 17. Last week, we discussed mostly the historical aspects of his authority. We went back in time to understand, the environment, the atmosphere he was in, and how things worked and so and so and so. So we covered that last time. Tonight, we are going to cover a little bit different. We are going to cover the nature of the Christ and how we perceive his morality. I think it's going to be an interesting topic, an interesting discussion. So, first thing, interpreting and discussing or studying, even better, the nature of the Christ. This is there's a name for this thing. This is called Christology. So Christology is the interpretation and the study of the nature of the Christ. What do you mean by nature of the Christ? As of the year approximately 325 after Jesus, we had the Council of Nicaea. The Council of Nicaea defined a lot of things that were going to be used later on for Christianity in general, for the church. But one thing that was very, I would say, hot, it was a hot debate at the time, was the nature of the Christ, meaning, was he God that had a physical body? Was he God that had a fluidic body? Was he a person that had God within? Was he a person? Was he not a body? So you see, there are very different perspectives. So it all comes down to this. Was he divine, yes or no? Was he human, yes or no? Was he both? Was he none? So those four questions start the debate. Was he divine? Was he human? Was he both? Was he none? In every denomination of Christianity, and we have about 41,000 denominations of Christianity, 41,000 denominations of Christianity, in each one of them, we should, not that we have, but we should, each one should have a clear definition of their Christology. So, for example, for a particular denomination, is Jesus God on earth? Is he totally human? No divine content per se. That's because it changes everything when you read whatever you read, Bible, especially the New Testament. It makes a tremendous difference. If you interpret, if your understanding is that he was God on earth, or if he was just a physical person, a very good spirit, and so on and so. That's the discussion for today, and this is Christology. For example, the Christology for the Catholics is in the Bible, because that's their sacred book, and so on and so on and so. What is the Spiritism's Christology, and where do we find it? We find it on Allan Kardec's The Genesis in chapter 15, item 2. That is where Allan Kardec defines our Christology. And I'm going to read a little bit, one paragraph, or actually let's read a couple of paragraphs from the explanation. Well, here goes. Chapter 15, item 2. As a man, so he's talking about Jesus. He's studying the nature of Jesus. As a man, he had the bodily composition of corporeal beings, but as a pure spirit, detached from matter, he wouldn't have lived the spirit life more than a corporeal life, the weaknesses of each of which he would not have. Let's go in parts here. He had the bodily composition of corporeal beings. What are corporeal beings? You and me. We are beings who have a physical body. We're incarnated. So he had the same bodily composition. What does he mean? He had organs, he had cells, and obviously molecules and atoms, but he had the same physical structure of anybody else's body. Nothing different, nothing special. And the text continues, however, as a pure spirit, detached from matter. We spoke about this in one of our past programs, Emancipation of the Soul, how the spirit detaches from matter. He had that ability. And because of that, he was living a spirit life much more intensely than a corporeal life. So he had things, abilities that we didn't, because he was living the spirit life intensely. You can refer to one of our programs that we did a couple of months ago. It's called The Emancipation of the Soul. We talk about this detachment from the body and soul. It's not the point here, but just as a reference to you. So physically, he was a body like you and me. And the text continues. The superiority of Jesus over other humans was not linked to the particularities of the body, but to those of the spirit, which dominated matter completely, and that of the perispirit, which was drawn from the most quintessential portion of Earth's fluid. So let's go easy here. So the body is the same as us. His superiority is in the spirit. It's the intelligent principle, his intelligent principle, that is much more advanced than us. So he, as a spirit, he was able to completely dominate matter. In the stage of evolution that we are as spirits, we are far, 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 far from having that kind of dominance over matter. Usually we are dominated by matter in the material life. He was the other way around. So he had this perispirit formed from Earth's fluid because he was incarnated here. So he had to use Earth's fluid, but in its most quintessential form, meaning the highest possible within the planetary fluid that you and I are far from being able to. So that defines in general, the Christology and the nature of the Christ. Now let's talk about morality and why is he such this, he divides history in two, before and after. It was not because he died on the cross only, because they were killing 500 people a day on the cross. So he would be just another one. So that wasn't the reason why he became who he became. So Allan Kardec is going to discuss that, of course, with the concourse of these spirits. And this is what we're going to go by. His soul was connected to the body but with the minimum possible ties. We just spoke about this, the emancipation of the soul. So the ties bonding spirit to the physical body were were the strictly indispensable. And since that was the case, he was constantly detached from the body. He had this ability, different than all of us. So he had things like second sight, which we discussed in the other program. So he could see things that we can't. Occasionally, a medium in trance will be able to see occasionally with limitations, but he was doing this all the time because he was living mostly a spirit life rather than a corporeal life. So that makes a difference. So think about this in physical life. Think about a colleague in your school days, elementary school, maybe high school, somebody that you're not necessarily close, but it was just part of the classroom. Let's put it this way. So time goes by, you follow your path. This person, this colleague follows their path. And let's say that one day this colleague becomes a very, very, very famous person. Maybe even president of the country or something really, really, really unique in our society. What happens is the goals that this person achieved could have been the same as you or us. When I say you, it's not you yourself, it's a way of speaking, myself included, of course. So it's something that we all thought deserved. But this person was able to get there and we didn't. So there's going to be a point where I should, not necessarily we do, but we should accept superiority. We're not talking about moral, just a person who became famous. So what happens is pride suffers from this, seeing this superiority on other people. And then we launch negative comments. Oh, I know this guy from the early days in school. He used to do this and that. And what we say about the person is not necessarily, and by the way, most of the times is something negative. As if we were able to dethrone the person from where they are with our words by ruining his reputation. Reputation, by the way, resides in those who speak, not in those who are the targets. That's different. So that's a natural behavior for most of us. Not everybody, but most of us, because of the stage of evolution that we are as spirits living in a society. So it becomes even worse when it has to do with morality. So a person or a colleague in the early days of school who was this, all 100% moral, by the book on everything. And then now they are very superior in morality than we are. So the same thing, we are going to start attacking because pride is hurt. So what happens is, so that happens to Jesus, for example. He became this person totally detached almost from the society because of his morality. So after the discarnation, people like that are remembered by their spirit only, not by their physical life. For example, when you go to a funeral, somebody is going to do an eulogy to the person who discarnated. We're going to hear nice things, even if we know that the person had a lot of problems and trouble, but they don't come up on an eulogy. You're going to say there was a nice person, did this, great people, great person. So it's interesting because the physical body is no longer alive. So it kind of changes our take on the situation. And this superiority for those who are really morally advanced and die, it increases with time. So the more we move away and forward from the day of discarnation or from the days that the person was living with us, so the more we move away from that, the more we think the person was superior. So Jesus is far more superior than our ability to understand while he was alive. He was put on the cross because we thought, he had no morality. He wasn't supposedly, quotes, please, not following the law. He was, going against God, supposedly. He wasn't. But so once he died and time went by, things start to change. And today he divides the history of humanity in before and after. Isn't that interesting? So Allan Kardec discusses that it takes time for the spirit to eclipse the body after discarnation. So here's one interesting phrase on the book. After death, there is no longer any comparison. Comparison meaning you and your colleague for so many years ago. After death, there is no longer any comparison. Only the spiritual being remains and seems to be all the greater the more distant the memory of the corporeal person is. So the longer we go along, the more evident becomes that we should not compare physical person to physical person. It doesn't make sense. And Allan Kardec continues. This is why those who have marked their passage upon the earth with works of true value are more appreciated after their death than when they were alive. Jesus is a special case, of course, but there are others. St. Francis of Assisi, even Gandhi. He was a lot more, he was regarded with different eyes as a spirit after he discarnated. That's very interesting. And here's another phrase. They is talking about those people like Jesus. They are judged with more impartiality because envies and jealousies have disappeared, and thus personal animosities no longer exist. So you see, envy and jealousy, it kind of attaches to something material. When there is nothing else material because the body is gone, then you can't use that as basis for a judgment. So you judge, we still judge, but we judge with more, we are less prone to partiality. So when we look at Jesus' life today, and we analyze from whatever point of view you want to analyze. You want to read books, you want to read the gospel, whatever historical documents, we have pieces of history about him outside the gospels. Things that governors were writing to the emperor saying this guy is, creating trouble and so and so. So we have pieces of historical information outside the gospel. And when we look at him, today, or much later, it doesn't have to be today, much later after his death, we change our perspective to the point that we had to study something called Christology. He was so great that, now, hold on, wait a minute. Was he God himself? Was he, half God, half man? Because of his authority. Nobody else on earth, nobody else in the history of humanity had the same authority, which, once again, came with time. It didn't come on the day he died on the cross. No. It was revealed with time. Because then we look back and say, oh, hold on, I'm beginning to understand what is said. It's making more sense now, but we had to digest the teachings, the information, and we haven't yet. Some of the things he said, we are still struggling. Love your enemies. We are still struggling. Love your neighbor. And why is that? Because why are we struggling? First, because we accept his authority. So we assume that is right. And it is. Now, that being said, it's difficult for me to follow something that is right. If I didn't think it was right, I wouldn't be facing inner conflict. It wouldn't matter. So the way the whole thing, the outcome of his authority over time make us invest in ourselves to be better people. We have a model, we have a role. It was him. He came and showed us how to do it. We thought it was strange. We thought we didn't agree. We made a bad decision between choosing him and Barabbas. But, we are learning. It took time to discover or to find out that we didn't do a good job in voting for Barabbas to walk free. Now we know it took time. It took time. That's part of the progress of the soul. As spirits, we got to learn. We got to go through errors and mistakes. It's trial and error a lot of times. So coming back to the authority of Jesus, now that we all accept this in Christianity in general, we should try to really feel that he is the model, and what he said is something that he said to me today, incarnated me and you. And we spoke about this in the first program. Who was Jesus' audience? Who was he talking to? He was talking to immortal spirits. Regardless, because they are spirits, regardless if we were incarnated at the time in Judea or Jerusalem, whatever. Regardless, when he said what he said, I was included. You were included. All of us, incarnated and discarnated. That is the size or the dimension of his authority. He talks to people. He talks to spirits across time. So what he said, what he recommended, it's also good for you and me. And that's in itself a reason for us to have such a thing as Christmas Day. The day itself, December 25th, doesn't really matter. What matters is the celebration of that one who had the greatest authority on the history of humanity. No doubt about it. He divides history in before and after. So the celebration is not what we consider in our society a birthday per se. It's much more. It's celebration of something that arrives to make me better. So when we celebrate his coming over and being with us, we are celebrating ourselves, because I'm being better or trying to be better because of him. So if I'm better, I should celebrate myself too. So you see, that's the dimension of his authority. He makes us celebrate not only him as a person, or even, if you will, a spirit, but all of us, all of us, all of us. Thank you very much for being with us once again on this Christmas day. And New Year's coming, so let's do the best. Let's state our New Year's resolutions with reasonable goals. There is no point in saying, no, I'm going to be like Jesus next year. No, because this is not reasonable. So happy holidays, and we'll be here next year. Thank you so much.